Welcome to Hope Talks Podcast with Grayson Willis and Pastor Margaret Michael, where you'll hear inspiring stories that are filled with hope and good news in Jesus Christ. You can also search for our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn. We would love your feedback and invite you to take a short, anonymous survey. You can find the link to the survey in the show notes.
Welcome to today's broadcast of Hope Talks. Today's broadcast will be part 2 of Dave and Donna Fickes' testimony. If you missed part 1 of their testimony, you can find that on our website, cotnaz.org. Click Watch Listen and click Hope Talks, and that was December 24th program. Now here is part 2 of their testimony. May God bless.
Your oh wow moment.
Oh.
When you got God.
Well, that was earlier.
That was right before we started doing Celebrate. My dad and both my brothers are mathematicians. They were all actuaries, and actuaries are rated by how many tests they pass. There's 7 of them. Very few pass 7. My dad passed 3, did very well for himself. Both my brothers passed all 7. Steve became very successful, sold 2 companies for $100 million each. That's my older brother. Jay passed all 7. And the difference between him and Steve was it nearly killed Steve. Jay walked through him. Jay was like Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. He was a math prodigy. About the age of 35, he quit his job in finance, became a firefighter. He hated finance. He hated math. He hated computer science. He had degrees in both. Became a firefighter. Dad and Steve were really angry because they, the wasted potential. And I remember Jay called me. He said, what do you think I should do? I'm going, you got to do what you want to do. Firefighting is what you do. You do it. Years later, at the age of 51, he died in a fire. And, Steve was my hero growing up. Jay was my hero later on. And I don't want to say it destroyed our family because we're still standing, but it was horrible. You lose a parent, that's one thing. You lose your younger brother, it's horrible. And a lot of my family is on the East Coast. Jay was on the East Coast, and they called and they said, my sister, she's a lawyer. She called, we're struggling. And I got off the phone. I told Donna, I said, I think I need to get out there quickly. And she goes, you go. Zach and I will be right behind you. And so I went out there and I was praying on the plane. What am I going to do? How do I help people? I'm destroyed. How can I help people if I'm hurting this bad? And God responded, you heal by healing. And so I went in there and had the firefighters. They break down everything. They had 2 public, not viewings, but where the public comes in and meets the family. It was rainy, it was windy, it was cold. For 4 hours, the public stood outside to come meet us for 2 straight days. And I remember they said, it'll get overwhelming. They'll have a room that you can go and take 5 if you need to. And I'm going, telling Don, I don't know if I can do this. But I did. I did both days, 4 hours, never took a break. And what I told people over and over, and I can't quote scripture. I don't have that kind of short-term memory anymore. I'm not a Bible pounder, but I said over and over, God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't stick it to people. This happened for a reason, and great things are going to happen. And I said this over and over because these people coming in, they were hurting worse than I was. The paramedic who worked on Jay for 45 minutes, he was torn up. The pastor, she was like, she couldn't even talk at times. And I kept telling him the same thing. He doesn't stick it to people. He doesn't make mistakes. Great things will happen. So we're at church after this happens, a refuge with a pastor named Travis Zachary, and we're doing a Bible study. And it wasn't really a Bible study. You go in on Wednesday nights, he put a verse up, and then you just talk about life. And this guy stood up, and he was crying. And he said his niece, 11 years old, was killed in a drive-by shooting. And then he said, God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't stick it to people. Great things will happen. And Donna turned to me. Her mouth was wide open and tears were just coming down her face. And she goes, that's what you said. And that's when she got it. And that's when I got it because I really struggled. I was angry at God. I didn't doubt his will, but I was angry. I'm going, why would God do this? I had a better relationship now with my sister-in-law because I always talked to my brother. I never talked to her. They named rewards of valor after Jay. They named a fire station after him, a highway, a park. But all that stuff piled on a table, to me, wasn't equal for what I lost. And so I kept wanting to know, God, what is it that's so great? And then I realized if it brings one person to Christ, it's worth it. It's worth it 10 times over. And that's where I gained comfort in my brother's death.
That's powerful. And I'll follow that up, and I'll say one of the things, too, so, in that about 10 years between when Dave had gotten sober and when that happened, and in that 10 years, like I said, we went to church, I helped in the children's stuff, I did, we kind of bounced around to churches in that time, but always did stuff, got involved in the churches, and I felt that's what I was doing, what I was supposed to do. But I wouldn't say that my faith grew in that time. And so that, with that, when Jay passed away, the other thing that happened with that was just watching, Laura, who's his wife, watching how she handled it. And, Laura has great faith. And, we didn't realize at that time, Dave talked to Jay all the time. And they would talk about God sometimes, but you didn't really know how involved, because they were in Delaware and we were in Texas, and how involved they were in church and how strong their faith was. But one of those things, going through there and list, all these people that came through and would talk about the things that Jay went to the youth group, took the kids camping, did this, did that, and all these things that he did in the church and that Laura did in the church. And we kind of realized that at that time. We're like, we didn't know that they did all this. But watching Laura through all of that too. So, we were up there for a week. There was another firefighter who had died at the same time with Jay, and then a firefighter who was in the hospital who passed away later. And Laura, she would stop, we'd all be at her house, and she would stop and say, okay, well, the other family is getting ready to do this, so let's stop and pray for them. Or when we were getting ready to go out to go to the funerals and the things that, okay, let's say a prayer before we go. And I just remember watching that and going, this is such a terrible time in her life, but she still has that strength to do this. And we had gone up there that year. We went up at Christmas time and saw her, and I had asked her about it. She said, honestly, I don't remember anything that I said. And she said that was God that did that. And so that was a huge thing for me too, just that seeing that faith and seeing that, just turning that over to God was huge. That made me want, I thought, and I think I said that to you, if I could have half as much faith as Laura did, I think I'd be doing pretty good, and so coupled with that, and then sitting in church and hearing that and going, hey, this is exactly, because I stood right next to Dave and heard him say that over and over and over again to people, and saying that, and then watching people walk off, they, come up and they're really down, and it gave them hope as they walked off. And, you'd see them smile when they walked off. And then hearing that again in church, not a coincidence that it was the exact same words. And so that made me want to have more than what I had, and be more involved in my walk with Christ. So,
one thing about faith is we tend to look at others and compare our faith on who has stronger faith. I do. I still do it. I sit with Margaret. I talk to Margaret and I go, oh man. I feel my faith's pretty good, but I get around her. There's this lady named Hirta. You get around her and go, I wish I had that faith. But God doesn't rake us on our faith. Right.
Yeah.
You want to talk about black and white. Yeah. It's pretty black and white. You either do or you don't. Yeah. And we get in the problem, that we do that. Sometimes we make ourselves feel not worthy because we think, I want to be better. I want to be better. I want to be the best at it. Life's not a competition, but we know it really is.
Right. Right.
And that's, we get caught in our own race.
Yeah. Right. Well, you all shared about this difficult loss in your family, and obviously the Lord had a lot to do with helping y'all deal with that, and I'm sure still deal with it. But just if somebody is listening and they dealt with an unexpected loss, what is something that you would mention to them, to just some advice, some, from experience to help them get through that difficult time?
We struggled. It was hard. for me, I got back. God got me through the funeral stuff, but I had to deal with my stuff later on. And I remember it was on my birthday after his death. He died on September 24th, 2016. And my birthday's November 5th. And I remember that day, and it had really nothing to do with my birthday. It's just coincidence. But I was really struggling. And I remember having a conversation with my wife and my sister, the lawyer sister, who really is gray on God. She believes in a higher power, but she really will not commit. But on this time, she said something very wise. And I was saying, I was really upset because I wasn't there for him. You know, we were in Texas. Jay died in Delaware. Jay was a year younger than me. The difference was, growing up, I played baseball. I was a middle linebacker. I was center fielder, 6'1". Jay was 5'7", 125 pounds. Jay got picked on. And I was always there to prevent that. And I felt like I could have done something, even though I was 1,000 miles away. And, you know, I was talking to Donna, and I said, you know, he was alone. And it bothers me. She goes, he wasn't alone. God was there. Yeah. I said, yeah, but I could have done something. She goes, you couldn't have done something. And my sister later on followed up with, if God had wanted you to do something, he wouldn't have had you 1,000 miles away.
That's good. Right.
And it made me think, that was God's work. Mm-hmm. It is so powerful, the way he works. And most of the time when he's working, we don't even realize he's working until we have the foresight to look back and say, you know, this has been happening. You know, in my life, God, he saved my life so many times. Never realized what he was doing until I was in a position I could look back and recognize.
I think I've shared that idea here before, but, you know, Moses said he wanted to see God. You know, we ask in the midst of things, God, where are you? And God said, you can't see me face to face, but after I pass by, you can see me from behind. Mm-hmm. And isn't that what happens? We look back and we see where God, he was so in it with us that he was too close for us to even see what was happening. But when we pass through those hard times, so often we can look back and go, oh yeah, he was there. Mm-hmm. He is faithful, and he can't be anything other than that, because that's who he is.
Well, and when this happened, you know, Jay was such a big part of my life. I talked to him 2 to 3 times a day on the phone. I don't know how many times he'd get off the phone because the alarm would sound and he'd have to go. And I never once thought, oh my God, he's in danger. He was always, he's so smart. He will not let anything happen. But after it happened, Donna had found a book. And I don't know if it was the title of the book or just the premise, A New Kind of Normal. And what it states is when you have a loss like that, that your life changes. That it's never going to go back to normal. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, in Jay's, I always felt like a bulldozer scooped a hunk of my life out and left a hole. And after the pain left, that hole was filled with concrete. You know? But what happens when you fill a hole with concrete amongst a field? Pretty soon stuff starts to grow. Yeah. You don't see it. It's like we said about God. You don't see it when it's happening. But one day you'll walk by and through the cracks, there's a flower. Yeah. And pretty soon there's a whole new landscape that was never there, that wouldn't have been possible without the tragedy happening. And that's where you don't see the big picture. You know, God thinks so much bigger than we do. He knows so many steps ahead what we do. We think just right now how it feels. You know, what do we like about it? We don't see the whole picture. Right. And eventually that hole gets filled up, and you'll see God's beauty at work.
Dave talked about, you know, Jay's wife, Laura. Jay was a big influence in our life.
Very Christian.
Yes, but, you know, Laura was Jay's wife. And so it's like you would talk to Jay and you would do this, and, you know, Laura was there, but she never was really part of that. And she really has become a big part of our lives, but really a big part in your family now, too. You know, the family just really embraced her. And she had said at one point she didn't really expect the family to kind of take her in like they did, but she's part of that family. And so, you know, that's been something, you're talking about that filling in the concrete, that's part of that new landscape, is that relationship with Laura in that way.
No, and she made the comment about my brothers and sisters, the loyalty. That, you know, she said, you guys are so loyal to each other. And I don't want to make us sound like we're choir boys or girls.
they're not.
Go. Two of us got kicked off of church choirs. No, we're not. But, boy, like, when it comes to protecting people, like Laura, we did surround her. And none of us are unhappy about that. Mm-hmm. We hold her in this, egomaniac alpha people. We hold her in a higher esteem than we hold ourselves. I truthfully believe that's universal among all my siblings.
And just to think about the influence, the quiet influence that she had in Jay's life, and maybe he had in hers. But, I believe that, we know in the garden everything kind of went awry, right? That's why we have the pain. That's why we have hurt and sin in the world. But with, I believe that we have a free will, and God I don't believe that was his best for Jay, but it's a part of being in this world full of sin and all of the things that we see that can go wrong. And in my belief, I wouldn't say that God caused that, but he can bring about, what's the scripture?
Well, the verse I was thinking about is how, the enemy might have meant it for evil, but God used it for good.
But see, that saying can be said for me. It's like you talk about miracles, and on my story, a lot of people point to the not drinking as a miracle. But that's not the miracle. The miracle is where he's led me today. I've done rough math, in the 16 plus years that I've been going to AA. I've spoke to X amount of people, this many days a week, this many weeks a year, this many years. I've gone to CR now totally 7 years. I've talked to people in CR weekly, here. And you're probably talking 16 plus years. I've spoken to people about recovery and God, probably 50,000 people. Now, 17 years ago, when I'm drinking myself to sleep, was that a possibility? No, there's the miracle that God took an alcoholic like me, a sinner like me. And then, like I said, I'm still a sinner, guys, but my life's so much better. Jay, you talk about Laura and what a peaceful influence she was on him. Jay wasn't a saint. Jay had an anger issue, sort of like your dad, but it goes back to, I remember when Jay was 4, he had an anger issue. I think it has to do with being so smart and having so little tolerance for people. I remember Mom trying to teach, who had a high school diploma, teaching my sister Kim and myself Algebra 2. And we had to get Jay, who's a year younger than me, come and help us. He's never taken Algebra 2. And Jay got so mad because we couldn't understand how simple Algebra 2 was. He never even took the class.
Hilarious.
God gave Jay Laura. Nobody more perfect for his situation. Mm-hmm. God gave me my wife, who had so much patience when I drank. God gave my wife and I a beautiful son. Magnificent mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And he doesn't waste a hurt. Right. He really doesn't. And, I just have to say, we didn't really introduce you all at the beginning of the broadcast. I just remember on a Monday night, this couple walking in to celebrate recovery. Back in April or May?
April, yeah.
It was April. And you're from Texas, and you've just taken a job at JMU. And what is your title?
I teach in hospitality.
Yeah. And so you all were coming up to look for a place to live and to do some paperwork at JMU, and then Celebrate Recovery was going to be important. So you all came to visit and said, we'll be back in June. And I think you found a place that weekend. You weren't sure if you were going to find one, but you found one. Housing here is a little crazy. And come to find out, you're Celebrate Recovery leaders. And I know we've joked about it a few times. Before you all left to go back, you came back into the church on a Wednesday to ask about the church. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to know, does this church support Celebrate Recovery, or does it just happen here? And had a great conversation with you all that day. And you said that you'd be back. And in June, you showed up. And I don't think y'all were planning to really get involved. And you've just stepped in and it amazes me how you have just fit into the fabric of recovery here and are just tremendous leaders. And we've even started a grief and trauma group that you are helping lead. And Dave, you just stepped right into helping lead a group that needed a co-leader. And I've watched you all just become a part of the family of God and want to do your part to help others. And when we hear from God and he heals us, we can't help but tell others, right? Like it just becomes just hearing your all's hearts today and hearing the way God met you in the places where you desperately needed that tender touch from him. And we can't always see way down the road like God can, right? Beth Moore wrote a book one time. It was called Just Enough Light for the Step I'm On. And I have watched you all since you've been here. It doesn't mean everything's been great and perfect, just like all of our lives. But you've just taken the next step. And your faith has continued to grow. So I just thank you so much for just how you've leaned in. You didn't come in, and sometimes when we go to a church, we kind of gauge how people know us, how well they know us. And you all just came in transparent and said, hey, here's who we are, what our family looks like. And I'm like, yes, so it's been beautiful just to engage you all and Zach and to have you a part of not just Celebrate Recovery, but you stepped in and you've helped best week ever. You were helping lead a cooking team. And I know you have quite a passion for teaching others about, both of you have a passion for teaching, as that's been both your professions. And just amazes me how God has opened doors. And we had needs here as a team and a church that needed certain volunteers, and it's been beautiful.
No, and we didn't intend. So our intent was we're going to move here. So first of all, we wanted to get back to Virginia. We knew this is where we wanted to be. And so we tried to get to Harrisonburg 3 times. The third time was the charm. So I had actually applied for jobs because moving was going to depend on my job. So I had applied in 2016. I was interviewed. I came out, did an on-campus interview, didn't get that job. Ended up that we were in Lubbock at the time, ended up going to SFA in Nacogdoches. And then our intent was we were going to go and stay in Nacogdoches 4 years and then move on. And then that was when COVID hit. And so jobs weren't open. And then when they did open, a job opened at JMU, and I applied for that. And that was would have started in 2022. And so I applied. I got interviewed. I got brought out to campus on Zoom to interview. I did that, did not get that job. And then this job opened up, and my first thought was, I've already tried twice. Why would I apply?
Before this job opened, they contacted her and said, we want you to apply for this job.
Yeah, this job's going to open. So I said, well, all right, I'll apply.
And
I applied, and I came out to interview, and I did my interview, and I went home, and I went, the interview was fine, but I don't know, because I had in my mind this, I don't know, because I've already tried twice, and do I, want to do it? But
one of the cool things
we got the job.
She got an offer, and the offer wasn't what it needed to be. It was, it's like, I don't know if we can afford to take this. When we want to do it, we can. And Donna's very upset. And I'm going, well, this is what you do. We will counteroffer. That's what you do in this thing. They always say, you will always counteroffer. And so we were saying, okay, you'll call them back tonight with the counter. About an hour later, they called her. And they said, we got a better offer for you.
Wow.
So
never had to counter.
It was God's time, and it was God's timing, because when we got here, we were experiencing some new struggles, and God put us in the right place for those struggles. And so
God wanted us here.
God wanted us here. And our original intent was we're going to look around at some different churches, and we're going to go to Celebrate Recovery, but we're just going to go, and we're just going to enjoy it. And so we got to, first Sunday, and okay, where do we want to go? And Dave said, well, we might as well go to the Church of the Nazarene, because we've,
we really like Celebrate Recovery.
So let's try it. And we never went anywhere else. So our whole plan of checking out churches did not, this was it. We stayed here, Celebrate Recovery, like a couple weeks in.
3 weeks in, Lewis, Lewis is such a good guy. He comes in and he said, "Hey, Dave, Pastor Margaret was wondering if you and Donna would maybe like to be leaders at Celebrate Recovery."
And we went, sure, why not?
Donna wasn't even there. Donna wasn't even there. And I said,
Dave's like, yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't even need to talk to her about it. Yeah, we will.
So our whole plan, was, but it was God's plan to do this. And it was God wanted us here. God put us here because this was the place that we needed to be to go through some things. And
we had some challenges that we were getting ready to face that we did not know about, and God put us here because there was people here to help us.
Yeah,
but that's the short-sighted part of it. God wants us here for something bigger that we don't know, and we won't. We might not ever know. Glory
but
goes
it's
to
good.
God.
That's right.
But I will say, like the Celebrate Recovery, we're doing the step studies right now, and that's just for me, that's been just amazing. So we did step studies in Nacogdoches, but they were really small. And so here, it's a little bit, it's small, but it's a little bit bigger. But just, from my standpoint, the things that I've experienced in the step study so far have just been amazing. And just the other ladies that are in the step study with me, it's like a little family, and it's just, it's wonderful, and it's, I want to make sure these people are okay, and I want to check in, and I, do things. And so it's been, talking about that growing your faith, it's sort of, we've talked about when we were in CR in Nacogdoches, we went and we did CR, and it was kind of like the went and you did church, and we were leaders and we did what we needed to do. But here I feel like, it's not just coming in to do what I need to do. And it's everything that comes outside of that as well that I want to be a part of. And so it really is kind of opening, I think for me at least, opening me up to other possibilities of things too.
Nacogdoches Celebrate Recovery, Barbara and Billy, they did an outstanding job, and it was small, and we struggled through COVID, as many recovery groups did, but it also prepared us for what we were coming to, because 4 years ago, or whatever, how long it's been since we were doing it, we're not the same people we were 4 years ago. God's prepared us in a way that only He can, and this is just our next step. We don't know what's next.
And when people walk in and they are at rock bottom, or they have dealt with trauma, and to be able to look at them and to see something that they can't see, to believe for them till they can believe for themselves, that minister of reconciliation, to where you can begin to speak hope into, just like Nurse Mike did you. When you speak that hope, when you speak that, oh, you have purpose here, and they look at you and go, wow, really? That was you? You did that? Like you were an alcoholic, or you had grief, you had trauma, and they can't hardly believe it because God has done this work in our lives. I'm including myself in that, to where we haven't arrived. We are on this journey for the rest of our life to be more like Christ, but our mission statement here is transformed by God to bring hope to others through Christ. And when I look at you two, that's what I see. I see this transformation that's happened. And because you've been willing and you've believed by faith that He is who He says He is, we find ourselves here. And coming to Celebrate Recovery doesn't make everything better, but it gives us tools and equips us to engage the things that life throws at us. And we find community. And so I would want to say that if anybody's listening today, that this is a place for anybody from any church. We have leaders from other churches, and people drive quite a ways to get here to be a part of this ministry. So thank you all for just leaning in and being willing to show up and engage, but then today to come in and just vulnerably share your story. It means a lot.
That's our pleasure.
Dave and Donna, thank you for joining us on Hope Talks today. It's been great to have you. Thank you for listening to today's broadcast of Hope Talks. We pray that today's broadcast has been a half hour of hope for your life. May God bless.
Hope Talks is sponsored by Church of the Nazarene Harrisonburg in partnership with Sunshine Ministries.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast of Hope Talks. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe for updates and the latest episodes. Also, if you're in the Harrisonburg-Rockingham County area, we invite you to listen on the radio each Sunday at noon on 1470 AM or 102.1 FM WBTX.